As the dust settled on the siege of Messana, the stage was set for the first major land confrontation of the First Punic War. The city of Agrigentum, one of the most prosperous and strategically important cities in Sicily, would become the focal point of a clash between the rising power of Rome and the established might of Carthage. This battle, fought in 262 BCE, would not only test the military prowess of both sides, but also set the tone for the grueling conflict that lay ahead. Agrigentum, known today as Agrigento, was one of the oldest and most powerful cities on the island of Sicily. Founded by Greek colonists around 580 BCE, the city had grown into a major center of commerce and culture. By the time of the First Punic War, Agrigentum was under Carthaginian control and served as a crucial hub for their operations on the island. Its location, midway along the southern coast of Sicily, made it a key logistical base for Carthage, providing access to both the western and eastern parts of the island. For Rome, capturing Agrigentum was a strategic imperative. With Messana secured, the Roman Senate sought to solidify their presence in Sicily by taking control of the island's major cities. Agrigentum, with its formidable defenses and significant population, was the next logical target. Controlling Agrigentum would not only disrupt Carthaginian supply lines, but also provide Rome with a strong base of operations for further campaigns in Sicily. The Carthaginians, aware of Agrigentum's importance, had fortified the city heavily and stationed a large garrison under the command of Hannibal Gisco, an experienced and capable general. For Hannibal, the defense of Agrigentum was crucial to maintaining Carthaginian dominance in Sicily. He knew that losing the city would embolden the Romans and weaken Carthage's position on the island. In the spring of 262 BCE, the Roman Senate dispatched two consular armies to Sicily, each commanded by one of the year's consuls, Lucius Postumius Megellus and Quintus Mamilius Vitellius. Together, these armies numbered approximately 40,000 men, including 4 legions of Roman citizens and an equal number of allied troops from the Italian cities. This force represented a significant commitment of Roman manpower and resources, reflecting the importance the Senate placed on the Sicilian campaign. As the Roman armies marched towards Agrigentum, they encountered little resistance. The fall of Messana had shaken the confidence of many smaller Sicilian cities, some of which chose to surrender to Rome rather than risk destruction. By the time the Romans reached Agrigentum, they had already secured several key towns and established supply lines back to their base at Messana. Upon arriving at Agrigentum, the Roman consuls wasted no time in preparing for a siege. The city was well protected by high walls and natural defenses, including steep hills on 3 sides. The only approach to the city was from the west, where the Romans began to establish their camps. Hannibal Gisco, observing the Roman preparations, knew that a direct assault on the city would be difficult. He decided to rely on the city's defenses and the possibility of reinforcements from Carthage. The siege of Agrigentum was one of the first major instances of siege warfare in the First Punic War. The Romans, who had extensive experience in siege operations from their campaigns in Italy, began by constructing a series of fortified camps around the city. These camps were connected by lines of circumvallation, effectively cutting off Agrigentum from any outside support. The Romans also began to build siege engines, including battering rams, siege towers, and catapults, with which they hoped to breach the city's walls. Inside Agrigentum, Hannibal Gisco prepared for a long and grueling defense. The Carthaginian general had a garrison of approximately 50,000 men, including a mix of Carthaginian soldiers, mercenaries, and local levies. Hannibal knew that his best chance of holding the city lay in delaying the Romans long enough for reinforcements to arrive from Carthage. To this end, he ordered his men to stockpile supplies and prepare for a prolonged siege. As the Romans tightened their grip on the city, they launched a series of probing attacks on Agrigentum's defenses. These assaults were designed to test the strength of the Carthaginian fortifications and identify weak points in the walls. However, Hannibal's defenders were well prepared, and the Roman attacks were repelled with heavy losses. The Romans quickly realized that a direct assault on the city would be costly, and decided to focus on starving the Carthaginians into submission. While the Romans settled in for a long siege, Carthage was not idle. News of the siege reached the Carthaginian Senate, which recognized the danger posed by the Roman advance. Losing Agrigentum would be a severe blow to Carthage's position in Sicily, and the Senate quickly authorized the dispatch of a relief force to the island. The command of this relief force was given to Hanno, the son of Hannibal Gisco. Hanno was a seasoned general with a reputation for both strategic acumen and ruthless determination. He assembled an army of approximately 50,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and 60 war elephants, the latter being a relatively new addition to the Carthaginian arsenal. Hanno's plan was to break the Roman siege and reinforce the garrison at Agrigentum, ensuring that the city remained in Carthaginian hands. Hanno's army landed in western Sicily and began marching towards Agrigentum. As they advanced, they encountered little resistance, as most of the smaller Sicilian towns had either surrendered to Rome or were unwilling to challenge the Carthaginian force. However, the Roman consuls were well aware of Hanno's approach. They had received reports of the Carthaginian reinforcements and understood that their position would become precarious if Hanno's army reached Agrigentum. The arrival of Hanno's army near Agrigentum set the stage for a decisive confrontation. Both sides understood that the outcome of this battle could determine the fate of the city, and possibly the entire campaign in Sicily. The Romans, eager to prevent Hanno from relieving the siege, prepared to meet the Carthaginians in open battle. Hanno, aware that the Romans would attempt to block his advance, devised a plan to outmaneuver the Roman forces. He established his camp on a hill near the town of Herbessos, approximately 30 kilometers from Agrigentum. From this position, Hanno launched a series of raids against the Roman supply lines, hoping to weaken the besieging army by cutting off their access to food and provisions. These raids had an immediate impact. The Romans, who had been relying on supplies brought in from the surrounding countryside, and the city of Herbessos, found themselves increasingly isolated. Famine and disease began to take their toll on the Roman legions, eroding their strength and morale. The Roman consuls, recognizing the danger, decided to confront Hanno's army directly. In the summer of 262 BCE, the two armies clashed in what would become the first major pitched battle of the First Punic War, the Battle of Agrigentum. The battlefield was a flat plain just outside the city, where both armies could deploy their full strength. On one side stood the Roman legions, organized into their traditional three-line formation: Hastati in the front, Principes in the second line, and Triari at the rear. The Roman cavalry was positioned on the flanks, ready to counter any Carthaginian attempts to outflank the legions. On the other side, Hanno deployed his forces with the Carthaginian infantry in the center, supported by mercenaries from Liguria and Iberia. His cavalry, which included a mix of Numidian and Libyan horsemen, was positioned on the wings alongside the war elephants. The elephants, a fearsome sight on the battlefield, were intended to break the Roman lines and sow chaos among the infantry. The battle began with a fierce exchange of missile fire, as both sides launched volleys of javelins, slings, and arrows at each other. The Roman legions, trained to withstand such attacks, held their ground, while the Carthaginian infantry advanced under cover of their missile troops. As the distance between the two armies closed, the war elephants were unleashed. The sight of the charging elephants struck fear into the Roman soldiers, many of whom had never faced such creatures in battle. The elephants crashed into the Roman lines, causing significant disruption and trampling many soldiers underfoot. However, the Roman commanders had anticipated this tactic and had prepared their troops accordingly. The Hastati, armed with their pilum, targeted the elephants' drivers and eyes, while the Principes moved in to support them. Despite the initial shock, the Roman legions managed to hold their formation and gradually began to turn the tide. As the elephants faltered, the Roman legions pushed forward, engaging the Carthaginian infantry in close combat. The fighting was brutal and chaotic, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Carthaginian mercenaries, known for their ferocity, put up a fierce resistance, but the disciplined Roman legions gradually gained the upper hand. On the flanks, the Roman cavalry clashed with their Carthaginian counterparts. The Numidian and Libyan cavalry, while skilled, found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered by the Roman horsemen. Despite their best efforts, the Carthaginian cavalry was eventually driven from the field, leaving the Carthaginian infantry exposed on both sides. Sensing that the battle was turning against him, Hanno attempted to rally his troops for a final stand. However, the relentless pressure from the Roman legions, combined with the loss of his cavalry and the failure of the elephants, proved too much. The Carthaginian line began to waver, and soon, the Romans broke through, routing the Carthaginian army. Hanno's forces were pursued relentlessly by the Roman cavalry, which cut down many of the fleeing soldiers. Hanno himself managed to escape, but the defeat was catastrophic for the Carthaginians. The remnants of his army retreated towards the west, leaving Agrigentum isolated and defenseless. With Hanno's defeat, the fate of Agrigentum was sealed. The Roman consuls, now free from the threat of Carthaginian reinforcements, intensified their efforts to capture the city. The siege continued for several more weeks, during which time the defenders' supplies dwindled and morale plummeted. Hannibal Gisco, recognizing that further resistance was futile, decided to attempt a breakout. Under the cover of darkness, he led a small contingent of his troops in a daring escape from the city. However, the Roman forces, alert to the possibility of such a move, intercepted Hannibal and his men before they could reach safety. Hannibal was captured, and the remaining defenders surrendered the city to the Romans. The fall of Agrigentum was a significant victory for Rome. The capture of the city not only solidified Roman control over central Sicily, but also sent a powerful message to other cities on the island. Rome was a force to be reckoned with, and resistance would be met with overwhelming force. In the aftermath of the battle, the Romans treated Agrigentum's population harshly. The city's inhabitants were sold into slavery, and the wealth of Agrigentum was plundered and sent back to Rome. This brutal treatment served as both a warning and an example to other cities in Sicily of the consequences of opposing Roman rule. The Battle of Agrigentum marked a turning point in the First Punic War. It was the first major land battle of the conflict, and its outcome demonstrated the effectiveness of Roman military organization and discipline. The victory at Agrigentum also boosted Roman morale and solidified the Senate's commitment to the Sicilian campaign. For Carthage, the loss of Agrigentum was a severe blow. The city had been a key stronghold, and its fall undermined Carthage's position in Sicily. The defeat also exposed the limitations of Carthaginian strategy, particularly their reliance on mercenaries and the challenges of coordinating operations across a vast empire. In the broader context of the First Punic War, the Battle of Agrigentum set the stage for further Roman advances in Sicily. With Agrigentum under their control, the Romans now had a secure base from which to launch operations against other Carthaginian-held cities. The war, which had begun as a series of skirmishes and sieges, was now evolving into a full-scale conflict that would test the endurance and resources of both Rome and Carthage. As the Romans prepared to press their advantage, Carthage was forced to reevaluate its strategy. The loss of Agrigentum highlighted the need for a more aggressive and coordinated approach to the war. In the months and years that followed, both sides would commit increasingly larger forces to the struggle for Sicily, leading to a series of bloody and protracted battles that would shape the future of the Mediterranean.